On this week's episode of Lincoln to Local, we are 1 week away from the final floor deadline of the Oklahoma legislature, and Oklahoma Farm Bureau's Gage Milliman will share all of the bills that Oklahoma Farm Bureau is watching, as well as an update on the Oklahoma state budget process. Gage, it's finally the month of May, which means the Oklahoma legislative session is kind of rounding the corner into the home stretch, so to speak. Where are we at in the legislative process? What's Farm Bureau got going on still?
Yeah, just like you said, it feels like we're nearing the end, but there's a lot of work still to do. This week they started their floor work in each chamber. All committee work is done for bills that have came through their original House of Origin. So we're worked through this first week of getting bills through the floor, and they actually just have 1 week left. Next week, Thursday, will be the deadline to get those bills across the floor. And then if anything has been changed, amended, titles still off of some of those bills, there are some committees they call conference committees that some of those bills could go to get those wrapped up. But we are nearing the end of that process, and they're putting some hours in on the floor this week and next.
And Farm Bureau's got some bills working, right? How many priority bills do we still have?
So we have 4 priority bills that are still alive. All of them are eligible to be heard on the Senate floor at any time, so we're hoping to get those across the finish line next week.
And I know one bill or one issue we've been talking about for a couple Lincoln locals, but we've seen some movement on, is one of cell-cultured or lab-based proteins, kind of meat replacements, and the way that those should be labeled. Where are those bills at, and kind of what progress have you guys seen in public policy?
Yeah, so that's one of those bills has actually completed that process to the point where it's headed to the governor's desk. So there are some bills that are made it through both chambers. House Bill 1126 by Jim Grego passed the Senate floor this week. Like I say, it's still waiting to be signed by the governor. There is one more of those cultivated protein bills, Senate Bill 96. It is eligible to be heard on the House floor this next week. We'll see if it's heard or not, but one of those has passed and moving forward.
And those are really labeling bills, right? I mean, we've talked a lot in the state of Oklahoma about labeling versus bans, and these are more labeling, correct?
Yep, they definitely are. And this one that did pass is going to label those proteins as cultivated protein food products. So it keeps it pretty simple, and it'll say where those are derived from, what cells that possibly animal or insect or plant that those cells came from. That'll be labeled on those packages.
I know Farm Bureau's been watching some developments with bills pertaining to renewable energy developments, and there's been some, obviously, that have been priority bills, but another kind of category of bills I know you guys have just been watching in public policy had to do with the setbacks of new wind facilities, and there's kind of been some bills, some movement there. What's kind of been the latest on that, even though I know Farm Bureau's just kind of monitoring that right now, right?
Yeah. So House Bill 2751 that obviously came through the House has been one of the most controversial bills over at the Capitol. Has a lot of support for it and has a lot of people that are opposing it. And it's a bill that would require some setbacks on renewable energy facilities, specifically kind of wind and solar. But it would also put some restrictions on the amount of wind speed that a county would have to average throughout the year, and also the population density of that county. The more populated, the less wind, those facilities would not be available to go up in those counties. So obviously there's a lot of, and our members are on both sides of that as well, but they had kind of a big rally at the Capitol last week, the day before that it went on the Senate Energy, and going through that committee, it actually failed in committee, so that one will not move forward. But there is a Senate bill out there, Senate Bill 2, that doesn't have as many restrictions, but it does have a quarter-mile setback on those renewable energy facilities. And it is eligible to be heard on the House floor, but it currently has the title off, which usually means they're still working on that bill. It may look different the next time we see it discussed. And if it gets the title put back on, it could pass the House floor and go to the governor's desk. If it comes without the title, there'll be some more work they have to do on it before it can complete the process. So we are still watching those bills, keeping our members updated on those as they go through.
And kind of a new issue this session, new to Lincoln Local anyway, is one of county roads and bridges. And I know as long as I've been at Farm Bureau, we've talked about the need for improving county roads and bridges in a lot of ways, or primarily through funding. And there's been a bill to help counties with that. If you can kind of talk about what that bill does.
Yeah, it's one that actually came up in discussion this week when one of our counties was in visiting with their representative, and they were asking about county funding for roads and bridges, and this bill was mentioned. It's House Bill 2758. 38 by Representative Trey Caldwell. And it creates the Preserving and Advancing County Transportation Fund. And it's one that just going to designate some dollars to go into this fund. And then out of that fund, that money will be designated to go to counties for work on county highways, roads, and bridges. And it'll be broken up based on the needs of those counties. You know, the miles of road they have, the amount of bridges they have that need repair. But it's one that I think that is probably still alive because it's a 31-page bill, which is a lot to get through, but it spells out all the funding, where that funding is going to come from, the percentage of what taxes are going to go to that. And in the climate we're at the Capitol, knowing where that funding is coming from is important to those legislators. It does have the title off, so it's still working through the process with some more work to be done. But it's one that we'll definitely keep an eye on and might be good for our rural counties to help with those county road projects.
Speaking of funding, it's budget time, or budget time is really upon us in the legislative session, as always kind of the last thing gets done before legislators hit the door for the end of session at the end of May. Where's the budget at, and kind of what's Farm Bureau watching as the legislators go through the budgeting process?
Yeah, the public often sees the budget comes up at the end of session, but they've been discussing and working on it throughout session, but it is definitely coming out more public of what's being discussed. And we all know it's going to be more of a shortfall this year than what we've had in the past few years. We've been able to, our legislators have been able to put some money into a rainy day fund, and we have some good money in savings, which is good for years like this. But when we have those bills that are requesting new funding, it's going to be difficult for some of those legislators to support that, knowing they're going to have to come up just to fund the current programs that we currently have. One of those instances would be the OSU Vet Medical School, which is a project that Farm Bureau definitely supports. We know OSU Vet School has had their challenges over the last couple of years, and in order for them to continue to be one of the top premier schools in the country, they're going to need a brand new facility. And they're looking to ask for about $275 million in money, whether that's one-time fund or spread out over multiple years. They're still working on that. And what we've kind of seen this last week is, even though there are legislators that are supportive of that, they're starting to ask the questions on, do you really need that much money? Is it really going to cost that much? Can we do something a little bit cheaper? So those are going to be the discussions they have going forward, just how they can stretch our state dollars as far as they can go.
Well, thanks for the update, Gage, and I know we'll be back talking about all the things that happen on these priority bills and the budget here in the coming weeks. So thank you.
You're welcome.